the public in, please?
They're already here.
They're here. Okay, fine. Look that way. I should have figured that out. Okay, we have 5 bills on the agenda. Lisa, does it matter which one we begin with?
1474 is the only one that is mine.
Okay, let's begin with 1474.
So 1474 authorizes an out-of-state licensed professional counselor to provide clinical professional counseling services through telehealth to an out-of-state student attending an institution of higher education in the state. The student and the counselor must have a previously established therapeutic relationship, and the clinical professional counseling services may not be provided for more than 5 days per month or 15 days per year. The authorization does not apply to a student who establishes residency in the state or is enrolled in a health insurance benefit plan in the state that restricts coverage to in-state healthcare providers. There were 2 sets of amendments that have been distributed to you. The first set, the number is 103420.
I'm gonna look at the latest agenda and see if I see
And
it.
that was on an email from you?
Yes. And those amendments clarify that the counselor must be in good standing with the regulatory agents or the regulatory organization in the other state. They require the counselor to notify the board that they will be providing the telehealth services and provide the board with their contact and licensing information, and also to contact the board if there are any changes in their licensing and contact information. Do you want to do the amendments one at a time?
Well, why don't we do the group of it?
Well, that's the first. There's two different documents, so that's the first document.
And these amendments come from whom or what?
They're from the sponsor. They're from Delegate Kaiser. She worked. She worked with the board. I know in part on these. I think with the association as well.
Can we hear from the board and then the association on that? These sound like consensus amendments, but I just want to hear that from the relevant parties. Is there someone here from the board? Is there someone here from the counselors?
Hi, Mr. Chair, Chair Rosenberg, members of the committee. This is Andrea Mansfield. I'm representing the licensed professional counselors of Maryland. And actually, I mean, I know my client, as we testified at the hearing, had a different set of amendments we had been working with the sponsor on that would have provided, actually much larger than just for students. It would have been continuity of care more broadly. So any individual that came into the state of Maryland that had an existing relationship with the counselor would be able to continue those services. And I know, I guess there were subsequent conversations to the hearing, since the hearing, that I know the chair and Delegate Kaiser did have with the board, and that is where these amendments have come from. And my client were very appreciative of working with the sponsor and the chair on this. They would prefer that this was much broader, as I said. I know there's a 3-year sunset as a part of these amendments, so I guess it's at least it gets this started, but we are hoping to continue working this issue to more broadly address it, because I know my client feels very strongly this is really about, you know, providing for mental health services for those in crisis, and we should be doing that more broadly for individuals. Thank you.
So you're for the second set of amendments, which have not yet been discussed for the subcommittee.
Well, I think the second set of amendments also make some additional changes to what you already see here.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, our set of amendments really aren't being discussed right here, because ours are much broader than this for an overall continuity of care.
Can I ask the sponsor, who has now joined us, to speak to the next set of, or should we have counsel first describe the second set of amendments?
Okay, so the second set of amendments require the student counselor relationship to have existed for 6 months before the counselor may provide telehealth services in accordance with the bill, and adds a 3-year sunset.
Delegate Kaiser, do you wish to speak to the amendments?
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and sorry to everyone. I was few minutes late logging off and logging back onto this one from the last subcommittee meeting. Just, you know, the chair mentioned that 6-month prior relationship as being a benefit, and I don't actually have the amendment language sitting in front of me. But we worked with the Counselor Association, and we worked with the board. I do like what Ms. Mansfield is trying to do, but I believe the chair is trying to get at that broader continuity of care through a letter, and at the least, we will work on it during the interim and try to get it done that part done next year.
So you support the second set of amendments?
I think my office provided 2 sets of amendments to Lisa, and we support both. They came in 2 parts.
Oh, okay, so you support both sets of amendments?
Yes, they're not
Okay.
they're not competing. They go together.
Okay, I'm sorry. My
They're
fault.
just drafted in 2 different documents.
Okay. Is the
Miss-
first
Mr.
set of
Ch-
amendments is before us? Who wishes to speak?
Mr. Chair, could I just ask, do
Certainly.
we have copies of the amendments?
I
haven't-
emailed them I thought I emailed them out to everybody.
Okay, I'll take another look. Thank you. Thank you.
I can, no.
Okay.
Do you want us to hold Delegate Cullison until
If you
get a
could,
chance?
if you could go to another bill, and if you don't mind, if it's just me, then,
No, I don't have them.
okay, so,
They
'Cause
were sent out to everyone on the subcommittee earlier today
okay.
I
by
was
staff.
Okay, I will, I'll take a look if, Mr. Chair, if you can go to another bill and then,
I can resend them too, because I might.
okay, great,
know.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we will put 1474 on hold and begin numerically then with House Bill 509, Maryland Inventory of Cemeteries and Burial Sites, Work Group Establishment, Delegate Simmons.
I'm also losing computer
Counsel.
power now that I've been sitting here. So
The-
I'm gonna
Delegate
go to my office.
muted.
Hold on, folks. We've moved on to, and we'll get back to 509 once it's indicated to me, someone indicates that everybody has the set of amendments, both sets.
No, 509, I think we're okay to go forward, right?
Right, that's what I'm calling up now.
So this bill establishes a Maryland Inventory of Cemeteries and Burial Sites Work Group. As originally introduced, it was going to be staffed by the Maryland Historical Trust and the Office of Cemetery Oversight. By December 1st, 2025, the work group must report its findings and recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly. What I circulated for this one actually is the third reader version of the Senate bill, the cross-file, which is Senate Bill 354, which passed the Senate 47-0. That bill was amended in the Senate to just have the Maryland Historical Trust, not the Office of Cemetery Oversight, provide staff for the work group. The fiscal note on this bill had originally anticipated $42,200 for the Historical Trust and $39,200 for the Office of Cemetery Oversight for them providing 6 months of contractual staff for this work group. I contacted the Maryland Historical Trust to find out if their fiscal impact changes by the removal of the OCO from the staffing, and they said it would stay the same. So the new fiscal note is anticipated to be just the $42,200 for the bill.
Mhm. Okay, is there a discussion on the amendments? Is there a motion on the amendments?
Move the amendments.
They are moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor of the amendments, say aye.
Mr. Chair, you do have a hand
I'm sorry, I can't see it. I've got my,
from Mr. Zinner.
Mr. Zinner, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the ability to speak to this. We have had a number of discussions with the Maryland Historical Trust, our group, and they have been extremely cooperative, very interested in doing this. They've asked us to put together a group of volunteers to help them work on this, and we have done that for them. And they've indicated that they could actually bring that fiscal cost note completely down. That was not necessarily, they put it in writing, but I don't want to represent what they said to you that was different. But I think that there's a lot of flexibility here and a lot of really good interest in moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zinner. Okay, is there a motion on the bill as amended with a significantly reduced, if not eliminated, fiscal note?
So moved. Second.
Moved and a second. All those in favor of the bill as amended 509, say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay. The bill moves forward. House Bill 535, Abandoned and Neglected Cemeteries Fund, Establishment and Income Tax Checkoff.
This bill,
Are we the lead, or this is joint with Ways and Schemes? Are we the lead or are they the lead?
we are the lead.
Okay, thank you.
The bill establishes the Abandoned and Neglected Cemeteries Fund and as originally introduced, an Abandoned and Neglected Cemeteries Fund checkoff on the individual income tax return form. The purpose of the fund is to provide for the care, preservation, maintenance, and restoration of abandoned and neglected cemeteries in the state. By September 30th annually, the Secretary of Labor must report to the General Assembly on the administration of the fund. Again, this is one where I circulated the third reader version of the Senate cross-file, Senate Bill 963, which passed the Senate 47-0. The Senate amended the bill to remove the, strike the provisions related to the income tax checkoff and instead authorize the governor to include in the annual budget bill an appropriation of $250,000 to the fund.
Okay, so what version, just to be clear, is before us?
So I
The
circulated
bill
a
is
third reader
introduced.
version of the Senate bill. You would presumably, based on your discussions, that what I just described would be amendments to the House bill to conform it to the Senate bill as it passed the Senate unanimously.
Okay, so what is first before us is, does someone wish to offer the Senate amendment, the amendments that would conform the bill to the Senate bill as passed by the Senate, which eliminates the checkoff? Is that correct,
It
Council?
eliminates the checkoff and it authorizes the governor to include a $250,000 appropriation in the budget for the fund.
Okay, Delegate Cullison,
Is the sponsor amenable to that amendment?
good question. Delegate Simmons? Delegate Simmons is not present. Has he been invited? Council, do you know if he was invited?
I assume and hope that he would have gotten the link, but I can't speak to whether or
I
not.
understand. Okay, okay.
David Zinner is here with his hand.
David, please go ahead.
Thank you again. I appreciate the ability to speak. We were horrified that the Senate deleted the checkoff from the bill. As far as we could tell, there was no opposition other than from the Chesapeake Bay Trust, who put out a fact sheet. And when we looked at that fact sheet, we saw that there were significant errors in it. I hope you've all gotten copies of some of the analysis that we've done, but there were two major problems with it. One was that the studies that they cited them incorrectly. When we had a professional researcher look at those studies, they concluded that having more choice increases the amount of money for the organizations that are listed and the amount of total money that that residents give. And the second problem with the Chesapeake Bay Trust fact sheet is that they only showed information through 2014, which was a low year, and we think it's a low year because of the economy. What they neglected to show was the last 8 years, which we received yesterday from the comptroller's office, which showed that the following year they went from $250,000 to $1 million, and they have quadrupled in 1 year and kept it at that very high rate. So their arguments totally fall apart. Now, I hope I'm speaking to the right issue, because as far as we know, there's no other opposition to this bill. We think you should reject the Senate amendment and restore the checkoff so that we have a chance to help abandoned and neglected cemeteries. Thank you.
Ms. Davis from the Trust.
Thank you so much, Delegate. I wish, David, that our revenue had jumped so much higher. It unfortunately has not. And Delegate Guzzoni had us look at some other states' tax checkoffs, and we found a great study from the state of New York. This is my old-fashioned screen share. This is state of New York has had a proliferation of tax checkoffs as well. And they looked at what happened over the course of time up until last year. I think this study was done January of last year. And as the number of tax checkoffs increases, the number of donors actually decreases, and it supports this choice overload hypothesis. And look, this is an important issue. We are incredibly sympathetic to the issue of abandoned cemeteries. We've offered with many of the committee members to look at this issue and contribute to an inventory. We are interested. We make a lot of grants on cemetery grounds, and we'd be interested in the natural resources element of a cemetery inventory project. So hopefully we can work with folks on the previous bill. You know, we think it could be sort of a cost share situation where we maybe put some dollars towards the inventory program or project from a natural resources perspective. And then, you know, the folks who are more interested in the grave sites themselves can sort of get a leveraged opportunity there. But we wish it were not the case, but unfortunately, all of the data do point to if there's a lot of tax checkoffs on the list, everyone's contribution goes down over time. Super interested to talk about what we might have cited incorrectly in the testimony, but unfortunately, that's the case. There's a lot of wonderful causes out there. We would be remiss to not let the committee know what would happen to the Chesapeake Bay Trust and the revenue that we share with the Department of Natural Resources, and quite frankly, the cancer and disabilities checkoffs now as well, if there were, you know, lots and lots and lots of checkoffs.
May I speak back? May I
I'm
speak to that?
inclined to wait until we have the sponsor of the bill with us. Council, can someone try and contact?
I did just forward the link again.
Thank you. Thank you. Good.
Delegate, but
You're a step ahead of me.
Got
We're
it.
thinking along the same. So I'm going to hold off on any further debate on this bill until Delegate Simmons joins us. So then we'll move on. Are we ready on 1474 or not? Delegate Cullison? Or do you need?
I believe that we are, Mr. Chair. On 774, yes. I have
1474.
1474, yes. I am
That'd
ready.
help us if we get to 1974.
All right. I've got it here in hand, so I now have an idea what people are asking for. So thank you for indulging me on this.
Oh, certainly. So we have one set of amendments on 1474 or
Two.
two? Oh, but two that are not
They
opposing.
work together.
They work together. They're not
Yeah.
opposing.
No.
They're playing well with each other. Okay. Is there any discussion of the two amendments? If not,
Have they been moved, Mr.?
well, that's what I'm going to ask now. Is there a motion on is someone want to move the first set of amendments?
I'll move the first set of amendments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and second. Is there discussion on the first set of amendments? Chair seeing no hands or otherwise. Is there a motion on the first set of amendments to move forward with that set of amendments to be
So moved.
followed by a motion on the second?
Seconded.
Delegate
think-
Cullison, was that you asking to moving the amendments?
Yes, I'm moving the amendments.
They are moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of the first set of amendments, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, they are adopted. Is there a motion on the second set of amendments?
Move the second set of amendments.
They are moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. Is there discussion? Okay, just so it's clear to everyone, Council, if we were to adopt first and second set, what are the changes that would make to the bill?
The
Please.
first set of amendments clarifies that the counselor must be in good standing with the regulatory authority in the other state, requires the counselor to notify the board that they will be providing the telehealth services and provide the board with their contact and licensing information, and also will contact the board if there are any changes in their licensing and contact information. The second set of amendments requires that the student counselor relationship have existed for at least 6 months before the counselor may provide telehealth services in accordance with the bill, strikes language that would have limited the amount of services that could be provided under the bill, and adds a 3-year sunset.
Okay. The second set of amendments is before us. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the second set of amendments? Okay, what is now before us is the bill with both sets of amendments. Delegate Simmons, welcome. With
Thank
both
you, sir.
sets of amendments adopted, is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Move the bill is amended.
So
Second.
moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? It is unanimous. Okay.
We want to
Now-
go back to 535. Delegate Simmons is
Okay.
now here.
Yes, Delegate Simmons, are you familiar with the various amendments that have been offered to your bill?
Yes, sir, I am. I do have reflected in front of me. I do know that we did do some corresponding on the amendments, and I said we get a report.
I'm sorry, there was breakup. Could you tell us again what your position is on the amendments?
Favorable to the amendments to be accepted.
Okay, so that would be, you are okay with removing the checkoff?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Council, let me ask council once again to summarize the amendments as they are now before us.
So the amendments strike provisions in the bill that would have created an income tax checkoff and authorize the governor to include an appropriation in the budget of $250,000 to the fund.
Okay, the amendments still authorize, correct?
Yes.
I want to make sure
Correct.
that's strict. But there would not be a checkoff, but the governor would be authorized to fund the program.
That's right.
And the sponsor is okay with that, those amendments.
That is correct, reflected in
Thank
the
you, sir.
amendment.
Mr. Zinner and then Delegate Riley.
I'd just like to point out that while I love the Chesapeake Bay Trust, I think they're great. The chart that was shown to you was the number of givers, was not the total amount given. Okay. Actually, that same study shows there was an increase in the total amount given when there were more participants. If you look at this chart, you can see where they cut off at 2014 in their testimony this year, and you can see exactly what happened when more folks were added the following year. So when you go from 250,000 to 1 million, competition is good. Giving people choice is good. And, I would encourage folks to not accept that amendment because it's really going to gut the program and it's not going to harm the Chesapeake Bay Trust. The statistics are really showing that more competition, more choices for people who live in the state of Maryland is a good thing.
Delegate Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I kind of had the same question in reference to money. So now we're not making it, we're taking away the option from people to donate and could possibly be more, but we're putting it on the budget, which is not looking good right now. And I heard on the floor just recently that may and shall meant the same thing, but I just want to hear somebody verify that
No, you
shall
heard wrong.
means you have to, and then may means it's your option. It's not mandatory. So may is not mandatory. Is that correct?
If I can clarify, so shall is mandatory, may is optional, and the question on the floor was the difference between shall not and may not.
Okay.
Not is not used in our drafting convention. We use may not to mean that something is prohibited. So the options are shall, may, or may not.
Okay. So we were correct. So shall is a must and may is option. So it's not mandatory. So it is, he has the authority to do that. And I guess he has the authority to do that year after year. But that is a lot of money. So I'm afraid that, as I forgot the gentleman's name, as he mentioned, Mr. Zinner, he might be a little worried with, the way the budget is this year and next year, they may not be getting that 250,000. So that's just my concern. Thank you.
Ms. Davis.
Again, I'm happy to share all of the data. We showed just those 2 years before and after the fourth tax checkoff went on disabilities, just to sort of isolate so you could see both years, 2 before, 2 after. We're happy to share all of our data. I really wish that our revenue were going up. We used to get about $600,000 a year back in the day from the tax checkoff. As more and more have come on, we just dropped our revenue predictions last year. So last year we brought in 398. we split that line with DNR, of course. So we used to get 600 back in the day. Now that there are 4, we last year got pulled in 398. That can be confirmed with the comptroller's office. And next year that the veterans tax checkoff, there's going to be a 5th one on there next tax year. We're predicting, our models are showing that our revenue is going to drop to about $357,000. So I wish that our revenue were going up. We make such great grant awards with these projects, but unfortunately it is not. None of us can predict the future. All we can do is it's hypothesize, but the hypothesis and New York State data do show, these data go through tax year 2023, that the more tax options you have on your revenue, on your form, the total number of givers goes down. The total amount given has gone up, but it has not kept up with inflation. And if you look at any one of the tax checkoffs, the causes, back in the day in 1984, there was one in New York. They got $1.5 million total to that organization. And now they're sharing the pie with 33 other entities, and they each bring in about $100,000. So again, we don't speak to this issue. In fact, we're very sympathetic to the abandoned cemeteries issue and want to help on the natural resources side. But we have to state what would happen to the trust and the revenue.
Thank you. Gentleman who's identified as YIF 511.
It's a female. My name is Yvonne Fisher.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I am with the Maryland Advocates for Cemeteries. And I have looked at the data. I appreciate Ms. Davis's vocals on that, but it is shown in other states besides New York, where they have sometimes 30 and 40 checkoffs, that the checkoffs are more favorable because it gives people a larger view of what's available for them to contribute to. I think all of us are in a financial deficit, but I think it's also fair to say that the people of Maryland should be able to make the decision on what they would like to give to. And I think charitable giving is what it should be. People decide what their hearts and their minds want to contribute to. So I think a checkoff is exceedingly important, because otherwise things cannot be done to help cemeteries. And I think that's a viable issue. We all have family members in cemeteries, and we want to protect them. So I think this fund as a checkoff is extremely necessary and important. Thank you.
Okay, so remind me, have we voted on the bill as amended or not amended?
No.
Okay. Delegate Bagnall.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but I will confess a certain level of discomfort at these amendments. I understand that the sponsor has accepted them, but I do want to, and I love the work of the Chesapeake Bay Trust and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I also do grow concerned that, because, to Delegate Riley's point, this is an appropriation that is not mandated, and given the number just within our own county of historically Black cemeteries that would benefit from this, just want to make sure that we are being thoughtful in this. And I do see a hand from the bill sponsor, so I will defer to the bill sponsor.
Thank you, Delegate Bagnall. Thank you, Delegate Bagnall, Mr. Chair. Obviously been a serious issue, not only here in Carrollton County, but throughout our state when it comes to the things.
Delegate Simmons, I hear very poor reception. Try again.
I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Somewhat better.
I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
please.
I will just get to the issue of concern of advocates to African Americans and the things that are going on in the state and how we can better advocate for them. I know we had a lot of conversation around the Chesapeake Bay Foundation Fund, and they have offered up a lot of information and data around what other states are doing when it comes to how they are supporting the need for residents to donate to this event. So looking over the and whether or not it will be a catastrophic damage to our communities, especially the African American cemeteries. You know, obviously that's the case. I was trying to see if there's high ground here for us to work together with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation activities around the hard work that they've done. I do not know if there's a path for that, but we added on get a little bit more feedback from the advocates on what's taking place in their space and reference my stance on the amendments to make sure I'm in line with the need to get it done.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate. Ms. Wetzel?
Hi, I'm also with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, as evidenced by my background. It's nice to see everyone. I just wanted to share that the trust is actually genuinely very interested in the issue of abandoned cemeteries. I personally sat on and facilitated a panel on a documentary called Eroding History a few months ago, which focuses on this topic. This is a really serious issue for a number of reasons, and not just for the history, but for the living people that have they're seeing their generations of families coffins come up out of the ground. And some of that's happening because of climate impacts. We track these issues because the trust cares about these impacts, these environmental impacts to communities. We've always been focused on the people issues and ultimately care about land uses, right? And cemeteries are a huge land use in the region as well. Our estimates, though, that a tax checkoff like this would likely raise about $30,000 at most a year, and that the issue of addressing this would cost millions of dollars, right? The trust would love to help, again, with the assessment of the land use piece of this, because the trust has resources for green infrastructure implementation that could help on these properties. But ultimately, obviously can't help with some of the capital expenses. I just wanted to share with you that the right sizing how we approach this is important, because what's raised in terms of funding here is going to probably not even be able to help address one cemetery, much less the hundreds, if not thousands, that exist that are in this state. So that's it. Put my hand out.
All right, so thank you. Delegate Simmons, do you have something to add, or is your hand
Yes, sir.
still up?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
They can hear
As
you.
a sponsor, please go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Delegate
Mr. Chair, I'm
Simmons.
just having some technical difficulties. I just wanted to reiterate, although my stance
We
on
can't
the
hear you at
amendment.
all now.
Let me turn my camera off. Will that help? Will the bandwidth help if I turn my camera off?
Yes.
Yes, it does often.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you, and I
that-
apologize for that. So I just wanted to say, due to the testimony, obviously, of the advocates around this issue and knowing the importance of what we're trying to do here to specifically serve the greater good in our communities, I'm going to have to ask that we move away from the amendments. And I feel that amendments may be detrimental to our communities as it currently written in its form, and that we try to do all we can to support the advocates in moving the bill forward.
So you wish to retain the language that would call for this to be a checkoff?
Yes, I think the most important thing, unless, at the minimum, if we're able to get 50K or the language changed to that amount, then I'm going to have to stick with the original language.
So you would support, well, I don't know. I think it's probably best to have an up or down on the checkoff.
Okay.
Which
Sure.
is,
So, all right. With that being said, Mr. Chair, then I'm going to be in support of the checkoff.
okay. Ms. Johnson, Jennifer Johnson.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Delegate. I would just like to recommend, since we are hearing from everybody, and there is cohesion that people do want to help, that there be a
Let me get it right
hybrid,
here.
where we actually accept what the Senate has offered, but also keep the tax check off.
Okay, we have amendments before us. I understand what you're trying to do. But if we were to adopt the amendments that have been suggested, that have been proposed to this body without the checkoff, would that be the one issue where we'd be in, at the moment, disagreement with the Senate?
That is
Council?
my understanding.
Let me ask council that question.
So what the Senate did is they struck the tax check off from the bill, and because of that added an optional $250,000 appropriation from the governor. So a hybrid of that, I guess, would be keeping a check off and having an appropriation, an optional appropriation from the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll note this bill is jointly assigned with Ways and Means because of the tax check off.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. And, like I said, and you can see based on the research that was offered in multiple states around our region, there's multiple checkoffs, upwards of 20 to 30, some more than that, and they work just fine. I think it's about, at the end of the day, the will of the people, and we should not take their right away to decide what they're willing to spend their hard-earned money on by isolating out certain beneficiaries.
Except that the checkoff does give people the opportunity to indicate how they want some of their money spent.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So what is before us is the bill with the first set of amendments and no amendment regarding, and the checkoff remaining.
I can log out.
Yes.
Correct. I don't know that it's consistent, because you can, to say the governor may appropriate 250 if you have the checkoff, because the purpose of a checkoff is to create and establish the funding. Well, I guess he can put more in. So that's what is before us. The bill as amended, which includes, since there is no amendment removing the checkoff stays, but there would be language authorizing the governor to appropriate $250,000 for for the fund. Presumably, if there isn't that much in and I'm going to say, if there isn't that much in the checkoff, then the governor can appropriate more, up to a total of 250. That is what the bill as amended would provide. If that amendment is acceptable, well, you're not on but I think that's consistent with what you're trying to do, Delegate Simmons. So the bill as amended is the checkoff, and the governor, if there isn't 250 in the checkoff, the governor may supplement whatever that amount is raised in the particular year up to $250,000 total.
I like that language. I think the key here for the advocates is to make sure that we have a workaround. The workaround is making sure that the checkoff is in place. Obviously, as we look towards our budgets here in the state of Maryland, and how we collaborate that with our residents, it's a safeguard to get to that number, and it gives us two directions of getting there. So I like it.
Okay. So the motion before us is a favorable on the bill with the amendment.
Delegate White Holland has her hand up.
I'm sorry. Delegate White Highland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, I wanted to know if the both and is usually included on these types of proposals. So for example, we're considering the checkbox and a potential additional appropriation that the governor could make. Is that usually standard practice when it comes to these types of proposals being considered for these checkbox opportunities paired with the governor's appropriation? I just like to know for more background.
I'm afraid I can't speak to that. We don't often deal with checkoffs in HGO, so that's right.
Yeah, this is kind of new to us.
I
Thank-
don't see why you couldn't. I think we could do what is being proposed. We may
Okay.
not have done it before, but I don't see why it would be contrary or unconstitutional or not permitted. I think it's permissible, but we
Okay.
haven't done it before, is my belief.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Delegate Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have anybody on Ways and Means with us that could answer that, or you think by the time, we could have it answered by the time we go for voting? Yes, council at Ways and Means, if that's possible?
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's gonna have to, otherwise, we're gonna
have.
have to decide to go with the amendments or to go with, the current bill that Delegate Simmons has on, and we don't want to, slow his bill down, but you think we could get council to?
Yeah, I do think that we should check in with Ways and Means. I think that they were expecting that this checkoff was being removed.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Is that something we could do before our voting?
This isn't
Today?
going to be on the voting list for 3 p.m. It
Oh,
would-
okay. So
This
we
is
do have
not.
time then.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
We want
Okay.
them to have it ready.
thank you.
So the motion is for the bill as amended and with the tax checkoff provision and the gubernatorial spending option as just discussed. So all those in favor, I think on this one, can we call the roll? Is there a roll call permitted, or certainly it's permitted? Do you have the list?
We normally just do hands. I have,
Okay.
this, but
All right, let's do, everybody raise your hand if you for the bill as with the amendment as just described. Please raise your hand. I'm gonna do that too. Hold on. I'm exercising my right. 1, 2, 3. Who is Dell user, please? Delegate Woods, you're not casting a vote at this time?
I had my hand raised. Did it go
Delegate-
down?
Oh,
Hold
it
on.
doesn't-
Put it-
Woods
my
and Doug
hand was
Fundrary
raised.
are raising their physical hands, not their virtual.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, so that we have, and I have in mind, I thought I did. So Delegate Riley, you do not have your hand, you do have your hand raised. Okay,
No,
anyone?
no, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I was just gonna wait. I would like to wait until we have the answer from council. So, and then I'll
Okay.
vote, so. So
Anyone
I'm abstain, I guess.
Okay, fine, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
And understood. Is
Um,
anyone opposed
Riley.
to the
Delegate.
bill as it's proposed to be amended? Delegate Cullison and Delegate Bondari. And Delegate Warman. Delegate Cullison, are you opposed?
No,
No,
sorry, it was a
no,
late
no.
hand.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I'm not opposed.
you're not, okay. Is anyone opposed to the bill as amended? Understanding that Delegate Riley is abstaining until we get further information from our colleagues on Ways and Means. Delegate Hutchinson is opposed. Okay, the motion carries. The bill will go forward, but we will most likely meet again then before the full committee gets to vote on this. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think so, because we have 14 more minutes right now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. House Bill 838 is our final bill.
Thank you.
today.
What about my bill?
Holding 1555.
And then, oh, okay, sorry, I thought that was my mistake. 838, Delegate Cullison.
This is the bill that we discussed yesterday. I've drafted and circulated amendments based on the discussion from yesterday that Caitlin and the Board of Nursing have looked at. And I'll leave it to them, I guess.
And Mr. Chair, it seems to me, unless we hear differently here, we found the words that everyone could live with. And I don't see Mitzi here or Rhonda. There's Mitzi. So let me ask them or ask Mitzi for confirmation that we are good to go on this set of amendments.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Mr. Chair. So I did send out an email this morning, and thank you for the additional amendments to the severe anemia transfer requirement. Unfortunately, the board still stands with opposing these changes since it still doesn't address their concern that severe anemia is not a low-risk pregnancy, but instead high risk. And so these patients should be automatically transferred and treated by the appropriate providers. And with that, the board wants to maintain severe anemia as a transfer requirement without the additional amendments to the statute. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I am going to push back a little because what we're hearing is if they have to transfer the mom because of a reading of below 10 units of hematocrit at 5 months, they can't see that patient anymore. Whereas that patient might be able to take an iron supplement and in 2 weeks be above 10. So I think the new language clearly indicates that the blood level is being checked throughout the pregnancy, and that if someone is at that low mark of 10, close to delivery time, then that's an automatic transfer. But that the person has had the chance to be treated and see if the treatment works prior to that. So I guess, Mr. Chair, I would like to move these amendments.
Second.
The amendments are moved and seconded, moved by the sponsor of the bill and seconded. All those in favor of the amendments, say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed to the amendments? There is none. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. On the bill as amended, is there any debate? Delegate Riley. You're muted.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you. We've seen this bill numerous times and I'm kind of confused now. So I kind of got the gist of the bill. We did have only really 2 unfavorables. One was the Maryland Health Department and then the Board of Nursing. So the Board of Nursing is still opposed for one reasoning. How about the Maryland Department of Health? Did we satisfy that one in the amendments? They're unfavorable.
The Board of Nursing and the Board of Health are inextricably linked at this point.
Okay.
So they're the same.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Delegate Hutchinson. Or are you getting your hand up early to vote?
No, I just from the Maryland Hospital Association, they were favorable with amendments. Where are they now?
They are favorable.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion is on the bill as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is anyone opposed to the bill as amended? It's unanimous.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
1555. Delegate Bondari's bill. Funeral establishments, crematories, and reduction facilities oversight. Council.
So as originally introduced, this bill requires the Office of Cemetery Oversight, I'm going to refer to as OCO, and the State Board of Morticians and Funeral Directors to adopt regulations that require funeral establishments, crematories, and reduction facilities to maintain adequate refrigerated holding facilities to ensure proper storage of human remains. It also required the OCO and the board to each conduct at least 2 unannounced inspections annually of each facility they regulate, employ at least 1 inspector, establish and maintain a public online database with violation, inspection, and complaint information, make specified notifications, and submit and publish online an annual report. If the OCO or the board finds that a person has violated the statutory requirements with gross negligence, improperly handled human remains, or repeatedly violated specified statutory requirements, the person is subject to a civil penalty of up to $50,000, permanent revocation of licensure, and referral for criminal prosecution. I circulated amendments from the sponsor that he's been working on with the attorney who did the review of the board from the as ordered by the governor's office. He's also been working with the board and the Office of Cemetery Oversight and MDH generally on the amendments. The amendments for both the OCO and the board strike the requirement to adopt regulations on refrigeration holding facilities, requires twice yearly unannounced inspections by a staff member, not by the director or the board, and for the OCO, only for operators that have been reprimanded within the immediately preceding 5 years, and for the board for facilities that are under probation. The fiscal note had expected a high expenditure increase for the additional inspections by the board and the office. So that's reduced by reducing those number of inspections. Strikes the requirement for inspection within 30 days after a sanitation violation, strikes language regarding inspection staffing, strikes the requirement that the database include complaints, strikes notice requirements, and strikes the annual reporting requirement. Then for the board only, not for the Office of Cemetery Oversight, the amendments require the governor to designate the board president, expands options for the governor to remove appointed members of the board, establishes quorum and requirements on the number of members to vote to take action, authorizes the executive director to direct the immediate investigation of certain complaints and requires those complaints to be presented to the board for review at the next scheduled meeting of the board, authorizes disciplinary action for improper handling of human remains or failing to get permission or a court order before embalming or artificially preserving a decedent. You previously read and authorizes the executive director to direct a board liaison to prepare charges rather than referring the case to the Office of the Attorney General for a prosecutor to prepare charges, authorizes the Secretary of Health to employ staff for the board, designate the executive director and set compensation for the board, and removes the prohibition against other state money being used to support the Board of Morticians and Funeral Directors Fund. Those last 2 provisions on the MDH authority over staff and the state money for the fund provisions sunset after 3 years. Not included in these amendments, but mentioned at the bill hearing was a suggestion to make this an emergency bill.
Delegate Hutchinson, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have 2 questions. My first question is for Erica. And Erica, you and I, our group had a great call. You addressed a lot of suggestions that you thought were appropriate to change. Does this amended bill address those issues that you brought to our attention?
Yes, it does.
Terrific. My second question is to Lindsay. In terms of the report that we received from the attorney, Mr. Sheeler, does it address the points that, I think there were 18 points. Does it address all of those 18, or is it to address the most critical ones that he identified first?
No, not all of his recommendations were required a legislative solution, but these were designed to address those areas that he felt needed legislative change.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Sponsor, any thoughts?
Thank you so much. I'm good with everything, all the amendment and everything. And
Mr.
thank you,
Malloy?
Lindy, for
Thank you.
your hard work.
Thank you. Mr. Malloy?
Mr. Chairman, there exists still some discrepancies in the bill as written. And I didn't know the protocol here for bringing that to your attention, but the section about inspecting the operator, The operator is a person. It's not the license, not the facility. I believe that section, and I apologize, Miss Rowe, could you help me out? Do you know which section that is? It still states that in the bill. Here it is. 5-204 B2 states to unannounced inspections of each registered crematory operator. That my understanding of the definition of operator in the regulations is not the facility, it's an individual who is licensed to operate the facility. How do you inspect an individual?
So would you suggest changing that to of each registered crematory and registered reduction facility?
Facility and establishment.
Yep. Thank you.
There's also a discrepancy in the regulations as to what is meant by a violation. I did talk to Mr. Sheeler this morning. He believes it's clear. I still don't believe it's clear. Hopefully Miss Artie could chime in on this because I believe her recommendations also stated it needs to be clarified as to what is a deficiency and when does a deficiency become a violation under the statute. Because what the bill proposes is to publish a list of violations. So I believe, the licensees are owed an obligation to know what is a violation and what's going to be published. Does anyone want to comment on that? Because
Are
you
you
said
talking about 10.2918.03 in the event that a permit holder fails to allow an inspection of the crematory or fails to comply with the notice to correct deficiencies or violation within the time is specified. Is that the one?
yes.
So
Good.
what is your suggestion there?
A failure to correct shall be deemed a violation. Some clear blanket statement that if it doesn't happen after the 30-day notice period to correct, it's deemed or determined to be a violation. And then so now we understand that you're not going to publish deficiencies on the website, but instead you're going to publish when they don't correct the deficiencies. We need some clarity on what's going to be published.
Ruth, do you want to comment? I mean,
Ms.
do you have
Artie,
Ruth?
please identify yourself.
You're muted, Ruth.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. Ruth Ann Artie, previous executive of the board, retired in 2018. I proposed amendments as well on this bill, and I think this is a big issue. If you have my amendments in front of you with the position paper, I identified as issue 4. There is confusion between deficiency and violation. I think it's unfair to the licensees to not give them the chance to fix deficiencies before they're violated and then made public. Some of the deficiencies may be quite small. Some of the deficiencies could be larger, and those deficiencies should be corrected in a shorter period of time as determined by the inspector and the board. So my language is in the paper, but I do believe it should read, does everyone have my amendments?
Council, do you have these amendments?
If they're in written testimony, then they are in the bill file.
Were they part of your testimony, Ms. Artie?
Testimony was sponsor only, but I did submit the written amendments. But basically, on an inspection sheet, they should be called deficiencies. The establishment supervising mortician should note the deficiencies, sign for the deficiencies, and be given a number of days to correct them before they become violations. If they don't correct them in the timely manner, then it should be a violation and a failed inspection and referred to the board for further action. And that was always the way it was done when the board was being diligent about inspections and bringing all inspections to the board. That makes the establishment accountable for deficiencies. They know what they're deficient in. They are given a time limit to correct them depending on the severity. And if they don't correct them with a follow-up inspection, they will be in violation. Their inspection sheets would be publicly available with violation. And particularly, Mr. Malloy and I discussed this last night, particularly if a crematory is in violation, those inspection sheets should be visible to the establishments that are sending human remains to those crematories, because ultimately they're responsible contractually to the families that their loved ones are being taken care of correctly. So if the establishments don't get to see the violations, that's a real problem if they're continuing to send human remains without the knowledge. So it should read deficiency, time to correct, and then violation should be published, in my opinion. And that is the way that it was done. Of course, they were never public, but I've always believed that they should be public.
Council, or you didn't have time right now to find them?
I see the amendments from Mr. Malloy on the witness testimony, but I don't see Ms. Artie's. But I guess my follow-up question is, I think that what you're referencing is language that appears in regulations. So perhaps someone from the board, I see Ms. Malone is here, can speak to whether or not this is something that even needs a legislative change, or is this something that could be addressed in regulation?
The public.
We can discuss it in regulation because I don't, I don't feel like it. I'd have to go over it more with my legislative liaison and my board counsel to see if a change is involved, because what we went over and the changes that were made was what was the same amendments that the board approved. So I'm not sure exactly step by step what Ms. Artie is referring to, but I have to look more into it.
All right, well, when do you think we'll be meeting again, Lindsay? Tomorrow morning?
I don't know right now. I know that government operations is going to be meeting again later today. I don't know the full schedule at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could we move these amendments, whatever we have now?
And then with the understanding that we would
Yes.
come
Yes.
back to consider any further amendments.
Yes.
Is there any amendment in any provision in this your set of amendments that needs to be held at this time in light of this discussion, council?
We can always amend based on the amended bill after this, if there are further changes.
Okay. Delegate Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted, for my clarity, is what the industry asking is just for a more streamlined kind of, I guess, grace period to correct things before they go public? Is that, in layman's term, what you guys are asking for?
If I may respond,
Please.
that there are already regulations that allow 30 days to correct. So we're not asking to streamline that. We're saying we need to up to 30 days. We need to understand, based on this statement about publishing violations, what exactly you mean when you say what you're going to publish. Because in the regulations, it says deficiencies or violations. And does that mean deficiencies or violations are synonymous based on it's written in the bill? And then we have a problem, because now you're publishing deficiencies that you haven't even had a chance to correct yet, which should not be the case. So it needs to be clear as to what constitutes a violation. So I'm believing that an amendment to the bill needs to be, directing the board to adopt regulations to distinguish between deficiencies and violation. That should be
Nathan,
the bill.
I agree, Mr. Malloy. Every licensee needs the chance to correct violations and up to 30 days. And it may only be one day if it's a severe violation, but that's something the inspector and the board can agree on. But to leave it where deficiencies might be published is not the goal. The goal is for people to correct deficiencies and that violations be known to the public and other facilities. It is
Delegate
ambiguous.
Cullison, you are speaking, but you are muted. Delegate Cullison?
He might be in a different meeting.
Yeah.
If I could also point out another.
Hold on, please. Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to concur with the industry experts that are speaking on it today. It is confusing as to what's going to be published and what isn't. And I think with any industry, certainly there's a fairness here. But I did wanted to ask a question to the Executive Director, Ms. Malone. In the bill, it's vague and it might be for certain reasons, but it speaks to about the Secretary, the Department of Health providing employees. Now, we came to this conversation at the onset because the inspectors had said that they had not inspected facilities for like 2 years. Is it your understanding, have they made a commitment? And I didn't get a chance to ask this last night, but have they committed to you getting the proper number of investigators or inspectors that you're in need of with this piece of legislation? Because if it isn't, then I think it might need to be a little bit more defined while we're working with this piece of legislation.
So I do not have anything definite and in place, because I like things in writing. So I haven't been told exactly how many investigators or inspectors, but I have received phone calls asking how many I would need. I've received phone calls and emails asking about how much funding we may possibly need. And that's more than I've ever had. So I guess it's a step in the right direction, but to say something solid that for sure we have this amount of funding or we're getting a certain amount of employees, I can't say.
No, Mr. Chair, just one more question for you, and actually it may go to Lindsay. Would it be appropriate to define that in this legislation? Because this is kind of where we've gotten to where they had not inspected for 2 years. And I don't want us to leave this session without giving the proper tools that they need of, being we have a whole new piece of legislation in front of us.
I mean, I would say that's a question for you all as far as the level of direction that you want to give in the bill, right? As opposed to leaving it to the board.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
governor in terms of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Sample Hughes. Delegate Hutchinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of wanting to move forward with these amendments, I do want to bring out the civil penalties and the revocation of the license. I know Delegate Shalega, who was part of the work group, I think has concerns about that as well. Is that excessive? Is that normal? Are we being reactive, or is everybody comfortable with that?
Who can speak to that?
Mr. Chair, if I can.
Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Delegate Hutchinson. I think the businesses, establishment who are doing good thing, it is not for them. They are wonderful, right? For those who are in violation, it will question other people who are doing great thing as well. It really such thing will question their character, commitment, and confidence who are doing great job, right? So we are talking about the human remains, somebody's loved ones. So I think for me, this is okay because it's not about business or selling popcorn or something, right? I mean, it's real serious issues. So I mean, whatever our committee believe that, but we are talking about somebody's loved ones.
If
Mr. Chair, I am so sorry, but it is 3:10 and we have to be finished voting by 3:45. So I understood from Lindsay that we are going to need to meet again. Can we hold this bill until our next meeting?
Yes, we can. So what you're saying is we're due in the full committee room.
Yes, we're due now in the full committee room.
And we have been summoned.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We will
Thank you,
adjourn
and I apologize for cutting it short.
we
Madam
will
Vice
announce
Chair,
when we will
Yes?
resume.
and Mr. Chair, would it be possible just to make comments since we're going to reconvene on where we think we are? Would
At
that
this
be
moment?
appropriate? Yes.
Sure.
If I could just offer a couple of things based
Okay.
on the conversation that we just had. It looks like we are asking council to add language about clarifying the regs around deficiencies versus violations, so that we can retain the violation language in the bill, but we can get that clarity through the regs as long as we're identifying in the bill that will happen. Potentially, based on what Delegate Hutchinson said, perhaps we would consider delaying the implementation of civil penalties to give the board time to work with the department and make sure that we get up to speed. And based on Delegate Sample Hughes' feedback, maybe we could also look at a letter working with the board on what they actually need, so that we don't necessarily have to put it in the bill, because that also might be a moving target.
And just to clarify, I don't have any, we haven't landed on any language regarding deficiencies versus violations, so I don't have anything to draft yet, but it is a point of discussion still.
Nathan has sent it. I will share with you. The board.
I just mean as far as the subcommittee's discussions didn't necessarily land anywhere.
On language, yeah. I think Mr. Malloy had
We had
mentioned it, but
suggested-
we didn't have specific language. Thank you.
If Mr. Malloy has some language, then perhaps he can send it to
Could you
Lindsay
send it, Mr. Malloy?
or to Delegate Bandari.
yes, it's in my
That is in
recommendation.
the written testimony.
It's
Yep.
written testimony.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
On page
All of that is
5.
appreciated.
Yeah, I
We
do
will
have.
adjourn and come back later. Thank you.